Welcome, everybody. I'm Matt Jacobs, Director of the Bob Graham Center for Public Service here at the University of Florida. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this event today, the Get Vote Ready, a conversation with Secretary of State Laurel M. Here at the Bob Graham Center, we're focused on three driving principles of civic engagement, public leadership, and public service. And something like voting encapsulates all three of those in terms of our individual engagement with our communities, our opportunity to define our vision of the future, and the elected officials who we select in their service and leadership as we pursue those visions. So I'm delighted that we have this opportunity. This will be the first of a few events we'll have on the election in the coming weeks. So this is also great to have Secretary Lee to kick this off for us. We're actually going to start, though, with President Fuchs here at UF, although he's coming to us from vacation in upstate New York. President Fuchs has been president at UF since 2015. He came to us from Cornell, where he was provost. He has a PhD in computer and electrical engineering from the University of Illinois and a divinity degree as well. He's lived all over the country, born in Oklahoma, lived in Alaska, lived in Miami. So welcome, President Fuchs, and I'll also say very quickly, thank you for all of your support for the Graham Center and our voter engagement efforts in particular. So President Fuchs.
Thank you, Professor Jacobs. You all, it's really good to join you. Indeed, I graduated from high school in Miami-Killian High School. I'm very, very proud of graduating from that public high school. If any of you here on the call, then go Cougars. And I wanted to just join the beginning of this because you all have a real privilege of being a part of a session with Secretary Lee. Secretary Lee is what we call a double gator. Her undergrad as well as her law degree is from the University of Florida. When she was at the University of Florida, she was both very involved in Florida Blue Key and won all kinds of awards from the university. And she's in a family of Gators. Her daughter Reagan, who got a master's degree last year, was president of Florida Blue Key, as well as other members of her family, her husband and others. So I wanted to join and just thank Secretary Lee for doing this. It's a real gift to you all and to our university for her to participate in this session. But secondly, I also wanted to reflect and thank each one of you, not just for voting this fall, but for your work in encouraging, as well with the Graham Center and many others, our fellow students to register and to vote. I always vote by mail because it's just more convenient for me, and I'm looking forward to getting my ballot, and I try to send it back as soon as I can so that I don't forget. So November 3rd, you all, which is Election Day, is a special day for me. It is also my birthday. I would give you all a quiz as to why it was special, but I don't want to take time from Secretary Lee, but it's also my birthday. So periodically, not frequently, but periodically, there are presidential elections on November 3rd. And I remember a long time ago when I was a little kid having my birthday, and President Lyndon Johnson was elected on my birthday. That's the first time I remember a presidential election on my birthday. So this year I'm not going to forget to vote because it's indeed my birthday. I also am just really proud, you all, that the Graham Center and many others at the university have facilitated us using the Rights Union for early voting and voting. And so early voting will start on October 24th. Last year, not last year, but in midterm elections in 2018, we had 8,000 voters that voted in the Rights Union, which was, I think, the biggest at any polling station in Alachua County. So I'm looking forward to breaking that record here in 2020. You know, in 2018, it was about 37% of those that were aged 18 to 29, voted in 2018. And that may not sound like a lot, but it's actually up from 22% that have voted in 2012. So from 2012 to 2018, it went from 22% to 37%. And I'm looking forward to a higher percentage, not just in that age group, but across the nation in all age groups. Our democracy is the most cherished thing we have. It's created by those before us, and we get to participate through voting. So thank you all, not just for voting, but for encouraging your fellow students to vote and all the work that you're doing in that area. Thank you to Professor Jacobs and all the Graham Center. And then a final many, many thanks to Secretary Lee for giving back your gift of engaging with us in your alma mater. Thank you, Secretary Lee and Professor Jacobs. Take care.
Thank you very much, President Fuchs. We appreciate you joining us from upstate New York and on your vacation. And happy birthday and happy election day in advance. As I mentioned, the Graham Center is really focused on civic engagement. And one of the primary ways that we, of course, do that is through voting. And the Graham Center coordinates much of the university's voter engagement efforts, our voter registration drives, our voter turnout drives, et cetera. I want to stress, though, that we do this in a nonpartisan manner. We are not able, nor do we wish to advocate for a particular policy or endorse a particular candidate. We believe fundamentally, though, in every American's right to participate in our democratic traditions. That is fundamental to our democracy and our society and to our civic engagement and our public service and our public leadership and how we move forward as a country. And this is, again, something that we believe is fundamental. It is also, I would add, at the college level, and it's so great to see so many participants here on the student side of things, it is actually a mandate at the federal level for us. The Higher Education Act of 1998 mandates that every higher educational institution should try to achieve 100% of voter registration. And so this is something that we think is really, really important, both in terms of our principles here at the center, but also in terms of what higher education is supposed to be about. So we're delighted to have Secretary of State Laurel Lee here to talk to us about how Florida is participating in this and getting voter ready across the state. I'll just add a little bit on to President Fox's introduction of Secretary Lee. Appointed by Governor Ron DeSantis as the 36th Secretary of State and began serving in February 2019. She previously served as a circuit court judge in Florida's 13th Judicial Circuit in Hillsborough County, and she was appointed by Governor Rick Scott in 2013 and reelected in 2014. As circuit court judge, Secretary Lee presided in the circuit civil division, the appellate division, and the domestic relations division. She is also a member of the Florida Supreme Court's Steering Committee on Family and Children in the Courts and the Florida Supreme Court's Commission on Trial Court Performance and Accountability. Prior to serving as a judge, she was an assistant United States attorney in the Middle District of Florida, where she initiated and prosecuted a wide range of criminal offenses. You'll notice a common theme here in terms of her work on violence against women and children, where she was Violence Against Women Act coordinator and the coordinator for the Interagency Bankruptcy Fraud Working Group as well. Of course, she has a prior history to that as well. I don't want to go through all of her bio, which is quite extensive, but I do think that it is important to note again that she is a double gator, as President Fox noted, earning both her undergraduate and her law degree here. And was inducted to the UF Hall of Fame in 1999. As President Fox mentioned, Secretary Lee is married to Florida State Senator Tom Lee, and they have 3 children. And so the way this is going to work, I'm going to turn it over to Secretary of State Lee for her to make some remarks for 10, 12 minutes. And then we'll have a moderator, Samantha Sexton, who I will introduce after Secretary Lee completes her remarks. Okay, Secretary Lee, the Zoom is yours.
Well, thank you, Dr. Jacobs, and also President Fox for the invitation to be here and for your kind introduction, and also to Samantha Sexton for facilitating this event for us today. Of course, I am thrilled to get to be here. Encouraging voter registration and voter participation is one of our key priorities at the Department of State. And of course, go Gators. There is no place that I'm more delighted to have the opportunity to connect with students and share this information than a forum such as this. So today I will cover briefly 3 topics: why your vote matters and your voice matters. Second, how to get registered and how to vote. And then finally, I'll spend a bit of time talking about what we're doing to ensure the integrity of our elections and to protect you and your vote. We'll leave ample time for questions at the end. I also want to be sure that I'm hearing from all of you and have an opportunity to answer the questions that may be on your minds about our democratic process. So I'll start on the subject of why your vote matters and why your voice matters. Here, it's important to explain a little bit about Florida and what makes our state and our electorate unique. So we are, of course, the third most populous state in the United States. And we're also what is referred to as a purple state. And this means that our voter demographics are divided very closely amongst political parties. So to break that down specifically for you with just a little bit of data, as of the end of July this year, we had 4,938,433 registered Republicans, 5,176,890 registered Democrats, about 175,000 voters who are affiliated with minor parties, and 3,634,929 voters with no party affiliation. So in total, we're close to 14 million registered voters in Florida. And the significance of that is that because of our voter registration breakdown, it's very possible for a candidate of either major political party to be successful statewide and to win elections statewide. So this means that, as you all have probably heard, we have a history of razor-thin margins in our elections in Florida. In the 2016 presidential election, Donald Trump won Florida by 1.2 percentage points. Back in 2012, Barack Obama won Florida by 0.9 percentage points. And so it goes. We also have very narrow margins in respect to our senatorial and gubernatorial elections. So all of that, I say to you, to begin with the landscape of our elections here and to share with you really how important every single vote is in Florida. Our elections are often decided by the most narrow margins. So it is critical that we get the highest number of citizens engaged that we can, and that we make sure they have the opportunity to vote. I'll spend just a moment, President Fox actually really hit on this, and it's an important point, and that is the significance of the youth vote. Millennials and Gen Z make up the largest share of eligible voters in Florida in 2020. The 2018 midterm election saw a 30-year high in young voter turnout, but even that number was 36% of eligible voters in that age group. So many young voters cite a confusing registration process and confusing voter procedures as a reason they don't vote, and that's why we're here today. I want to be sure that young voters in Florida understand exactly how to get registered and the ways in which they can vote. We want to make it easy and accessible for all of you so that we can get that number of voters up even higher this year. So to begin, how do we register to vote in the state of Florida? It is efficient and fast. One very important thing for all of you to know, however, is that the deadline to register to vote for this year's presidential election is October 5th. So it's important that if you haven't already registered, that you do so right away and get your registration in place before October 5th. So there are three principal methods you can use to register to vote. One is you can register online at registertovoteflorida.gov. The second, you can register in person at your driver's license office, tax collector's office, or voter registration agency. And finally, you can register by mail or in person at your local Supervisor of Elections office. You must return or postmark your registration. Again, it must be back to your supervisor's office no later than 5 p.m. local time on October 5th. Campus organizations, of course, notably the Graham Center, does an incredible job. The pillars of focus of the Graham Center are exactly the types of things that are key priorities for us at the Department of State. Civic engagement, public service, That's a wonderful resource for all of you, not only to get engaged today, but also to help shape you as leaders and candidates and civically engaged citizens of Florida in the future. So the Graham Center certainly can help any of you who are interested in registering and have questions. Student groups can also be key advocates in this way. I know we have college Democrats, college Republicans. There are a number of student groups who also care a great deal about making sure that you get your hands on that voter registration application and know what to do with it and get it turned in. Our focus is making this process easy and accessible for all who are interested in registering to vote. So registration has been a big priority for our administration. Since my appointment in 2019, over 1.3 million Florida residents are new registered voters. And just last week, in connection with National Voter Registration Month this month, we sent out postcards from the Department of State to every single potentially eligible but unregistered voter in the state of Florida to encourage them to register and to tell them about how to vote in our state. So I believe we're going to exceed last year's number, and I'm very hopeful that we can have both record voter registration and record voter turnout for the 2020 presidential election. I was absolutely thrilled to see all of the efforts that are happening at the University of Florida, both from the Graham Center's work to also the student groups and student athletes like the soccer team and the football team, making sure that students are getting this information and getting opportunities to get registered. So once you're registered, then what's next? I want to spend just a few moments talking about voting methods and voting options in Florida. So the 2020 general election is November 3rd. For voting options in Florida, you have three. First, you can vote by mail. I know there's a lot of discussion on the national level about vote by mail, but I want to tell you that in our state, we have been doing vote by mail effectively, efficiently, and securely for many years. For us, it's a process we're not trying to create it right now. It's one we're very familiar with. Our voters know about it, our election officials know about it, and it's verified, tried, and true. So you can, in fact, vote by mail in Florida and have confidence in the security of your vote and the voting process. You can request a vote by mail ballot online at your Supervisor of Elections website. You can request it in writing via email, fax, or snail mail to your Supervisor of Elections. You can also make the request in person at your county Supervisor of Elections office or by telephone. So many methods to request a vote by mail ballot, and it's not too late to do so if you're interested in voting by mail and haven't made that request yet. The deadline to request a vote by mail ballot is October 24th. So you can also early vote. And this is a great option for those who like to vote in person but want to avoid lines and crowds. Early voting will be occurring statewide in between October 24th and 31st. Additional early voting days may be available in your county, but there will certainly be early voting in between October 24th and 31st. Visit your Supervisor of Elections website to find out dates, times, and locations. I'm also delighted to hear the Rights Union is going to be a location again this year. That should make it easy for all of you who wish to early vote. Finally, you can vote in person on Election Day, which we anticipate is going to be an orderly, safe, and secure process. So that will be November 3rd from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. local time. Also this year, in light of the coronavirus pandemic that we're all still experiencing and working through, I want to assure you that our local elections officials are prepared with PPE. They'll be wearing masks. Hand sanitizer is available. They're sanitizing the polling locations, the voting equipment, and everything you touch as voters go through those in-person voting sites. Finally, I want to share with you a little bit about what we are doing to secure our elections and keep your vote secure. We want to ensure that you understand what we're doing to protect you and your vote this year. Over the last several years, Florida has invested millions of dollars in election security to harden our elections infrastructure across the state. We've passed down over $20 million to local elections officials to address federal election security alone. Our legislature and governor, we're very grateful, created a cybersecurity bureau here at the Department of State. And the reason that's significant is because it enables us to have key professionals who are able to maintain our systems at the Department of State with a high level of security, but also go out to the counties and assist any local elections officials who need assistance in making sure their systems and infrastructure meet a security baseline as well. We work very closely with our law enforcement partners, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, FDLE, the Postal Inspection Service, to ensure that we have access to important intelligence information and are prepared to address any threats that may be posed to our election system. And finally, on that subject of threats, I'll take just a moment on the subject of foreign interference in our elections. I know that's something that we're all hearing about on the national scale, and definitely want to touch on that. To begin, it's important to distinguish when we hear a term like foreign interference between the concept of direct and actual threats, attempts to intrude upon our election networks, and something we refer to as misinformation and disinformation. Both are very real threats, but what we do to address those threats is very different. So with respect to actual efforts to penetrate or interfere with our elections network, our elections related websites, I just discussed with you a little bit about what we're doing there. We've made some very critical investments in modernizing equipment and systems to ensure that we're abreast of the threat landscape and we're prepared to meet the kinds of challenges that we expect we'll be seeing this election cycle. But misinformation and disinformation is different and also a very significant threat. And this is an area where all of you really play an important part in us having a successful elections process that the public can be confident in. So misinformation and disinformation refers to content usually shared on social media that creates a barrier to voters having correct and actionable information about elections. The intent is to misinform or mislead with incorrect information to affect voter behavior. A classic example of this might be to share information on social media that election day has been moved from Tuesday to Wednesday, or that precinct locations have been changed and voters should go somewhere else if they're wishing to cast their ballot. The purpose of this, of course, is to make it harder for voters to actually exercise their right to vote. So we're working very hard to be sure that voters understand this is a threat, and that when it comes to elections information, it's vital that you seek and receive elections information from trusted sources, namely your local supervisor of election, the Department of State, or law enforcement agencies who are working very hard to be sure that every voter can easily determine when and where to vote, where their precinct location is, and any information that they might need about updating or changing their registration. So the number one tip I could share with you is if you see something on social media that relates to elections, candidates, election day, be a critical consumer of that information. Think hard about it, verify it, really be cautious before you forward it and pass it along, because it's very hard for us to counter with correct information once some of this misinformation gets out there in the public consciousness. I know at the Department of State, we're engaging in a voter education campaign. Hopefully you either have or will see some of our public service announcements and billboards and outreach efforts to make sure that voters get this accurate information and know everything that we're doing to prepare. So with that, I know we want to leave substantial time for questions. So that is my basic overview. Again, please remember, our votes are narrowly decided. Your vote matters. It's not too late to get registered. We hope that if you aren't registered already, you will be soon. And that for all of you who are registered, by all means, please get out and vote. Whatever method you choose, we want to see you voting on election day. So finally, I want to conclude with this. We're committed to election security, and we're also committed at the Department of State to impartiality. Elections are partisan, but elections administration is not. We work for every Floridian here, regardless of your political affiliation, your beliefs, or the causes that interest you. We are here to work for all of you. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Secretary Lee. That was a wonderful set of remarks there. Before I introduce Samantha Sexton, who's going to be moderating the question and answer period, I just want to note that one of the additional events that we're working on that hopefully we can get together in the next few weeks is actually going to focus on social media and elections. And so your comments there on the role of social media and misinformation and disinformation, we're hopefully going to be able to do a specific session on that in the coming weeks. So
excellent. That's so important
to hear you mention that. Okay, so Samantha Sexton is going to be the moderator here. We're delighted to work with Samantha on this. We work with Samantha very closely on a number of things, including especially our Tallahassee internship program, which she really helps us out a lot with there. Samantha Sexton is our Director of Government Relations in our Office of Government Relations. So she's based in Tallahassee as our state rep there. And she is really helping to advance UF's interests at the state level for us. Before joining UF, she served as the Vice President of Legislative and Regulatory Affairs for the Personal Insurance Federation of Florida, which was based in Tallahassee. And she has also served as the Director of Government Affairs for the PACE Center for Girls as well. During our time with PACE, she expanded PACE's public sector resources at the local and state level and positioned as the lead advocate for at-risk girls and supported the program's expansion into Georgia as well. She's been very widely recognized as a rising star in the political space by the Village Square, as also as a 30 under 30 rising star of Florida politics, and as a rising star in the lobbying industry by Influence magazine. And she was recognized in 2020 by the Tallahassee Democrat as one of the 25 women you need to know. And so she does a fantastic job in all of her work. Again, we have a double gator here. She graduated from UF with her BA in 2011 and her MA in 2013. And so at some point, we also hope to have Samantha do kind of a career and professional development talk for students here as well, because I think that we could learn a lot from her in terms of how she's progressed through her career as well. So Samantha, I'll turn it over to you to run the Q&A and moderate the next half hour or so of this session. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate it. And again, Secretary Lee, thank you for joining us. We had heard, and I think many of us on this call today just learned that President Fox shares his birthday, not every year, but every couple of elections with Election Day. So I want to just start. What's your recollection of your first time ever voting or engaging in this electoral process?
Well, I will tell you probably my most memorable voting experience. It wasn't my first time, but it was certainly the most memorable. Was a point when I was acquainted with somebody who was running for Congress. And this friend of mine was running. I really felt like he would be a great member, but he ended up in a runoff. He was in a primary election. The primary went to a runoff. And the runoff was occurring on a day where I was very busy. At this point, I was practicing law. I finished school. I was a lawyer. And it was an incredibly busy day at work. And it was pouring rain. And I thought long and hard about, am I really going to get in my car and go vote? And I did, because at that point I was really committed, and I thought this person is going to be an excellent member. This is really who I feel should be there. And he ended up winning that election by just a handful of votes. Like every person who was willing to get in their car and drive in the rain and take that extra hour out of their day to do it, it really resonated with me, because that was the moment for me personally where I saw how close election margins can be and how much it matters for every single voter to take the time and make it happen. So for me, that was my most memorable election day. And it really, for me, underscored, what has been a commitment ever since to never miss, never skip an election, even if it's a runoff, even if it's pouring rain, to always be there, because those votes matter so very much.
Absolutely. And I would say as Floridians, I think we've all been in that similar situation. I remember actually it was a year that I was on campus. I had a scooter and I was trying to figure out how in the world, because I didn't early vote, I didn't vote by mail. I was scheduling my time to go out and vote on election day. But like you, basically had to find the gumption to get out there, face the rain, and go and actually cast my ballot. So with that, we have a lot of first-time voters on the call with us today. Yes, we are in a pandemic. Nothing is normal. So what pieces of advice would you give to these first-time voters that are trying to make the decision of how they'll engage on election day or before?
Well, that's a great question because things have changed so much in the last 6 months. For everything about how political campaigns are operating to how we're sharing information with voters. And so in a typical election year, you would be probably getting invited to a lot of candidate forums or community town halls or places where you could go and actually sit and meet the candidates and talk to them and hear presentations. And so one thing that's very important to know is that that activity is still happening, but it has all moved virtually. So keep an eye out for opportunities to observe and participate virtually in those types of things, those candidate forums, get to talk to the people who may be running in your districts. So really engage in who they are, who supports the kinds of things you care about. And the other thing that's interesting to know is that we have 6 constitutional amendments that will be on the ballot in November. So take a little bit of time and read what those are and see how you feel about those. One of the most important things that voters can do is try to gather that information and educate themselves before they show up at the polls so that you already have a good sense of how you feel and what you care about and how you want to cast that ballot.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And I know one thing that's happening in the background, I see the Bob Graham Center on social media, they're tweeting out great resources. So for those of y'all that are attending this virtual event, please feel free to keep up, Facebook and Twitter for those great resources, because that sample ballot actually can be located at your local Supervisor of Elections office. The Secretary has already mentioned that office is a go-to resource for all of us as voters. And that's one great way to get started on the research side of things. One question that did come in overnight, you've touched on it a bit. The U.S. Postal Service really has been at the center of a lot of the recent conversations. Voting by mail is a choice that some of our, not only students, but voters will choose across the state of Florida. You mentioned when voters should actually request their ballot, but when should voters actually submit that ballot to ensure that it actually reaches their local Supervisor of Elections office?
Well, and that's a very important question because states have different election laws. In Florida, that vote by mail ballot must be received by 7 p.m. on election day to be counted. So if it arrives the next day or the next week, it will not be counted. So it's essential that you get that ballot back to the Supervisors of Election office on election day. So, certainly I think it's important to include days for mailing. I know I saw media reports that there were voters in this past election, in the primary, that dropped their ballots in the mail the day before the election and they weren't counted. So we don't want to wait that close. I think you want to give yourself days in advance to make sure that there's time for it to get there. If you have any questions, and sometimes this happens, sometimes a voter will request a vote by mail, but they want a little more time to research the issues or hear from candidates. So they still have their vote by mail ballot and they feel like it might be too close, they're not sure. One thing that's important to know is that you can take your vote by mail ballot and drop it off at any early voting location. And many supervisors of elections are also setting up additional drop boxes where voters can go and drop off that vote by mail ballot. On election day, you can still drop it off, but you have to take it to one of your Supervisor of Elections offices because the early voting locations aren't still open. But there are a lot of things, so that would probably be my biggest piece of advice. If you do want to vote by mail and you're not sure and you think you may be a little bit too close to election day, take that ballot and drop it off. It's also important to know that you can still, even if you've requested a vote by mail ballot, if you change your mind and say, you know what, I'd rather early vote, I want to go in person, that's fine too. You can go vote in person even though you requested the ballot. It's still up to you which method you want to choose to cast your vote.
I think that's a fantastic point, especially because some of our students, not knowing where they're going to be on election day, might request that ballot early, but might get to the point where they haven't actually mailed it or returned it, and want to have the experience of actually going to the polls on election day. So thank you for highlighting that. I have a few more technical questions before we get into some more personal things about how you've come to your position, but also how you use your time at the University of Florida to elevate some of your involvement through politics. So my first question is, goodness, let's see, we have a lot of really good ones here. What forms of identification are actually needed if someone was to go vote in person?
So obviously the most common form of identification would be a Florida driver's license or a Florida identification card. However, there are actually numerous other forms of identification that are acceptable, including a United States passport, military ID, a student ID, even things like a retirement center identification or a neighborhood association identification. So all of those things, we have a long list that's set out in our Florida statutes about what are the acceptable forms of ID. And if you have any questions about whether you've got one of those on hand, again, easy resources online at the Department of State or your Supervisor of Elections office so that you can check before you go, check to be sure what are you going to need and do you have it in your wallet. But our legislature has, I think, done an excellent job creating a very long list of acceptable forms of ID. It's really just intended to verify that the voter who is at the precinct is the person that they say they are, and then they get checked off the roll.
Wonderful, thank you. And one last technical question. As you know, we have a good amount of out-of-state students attending the University of Florida. Some may be physically in Gainesville or residing back home due to the unforeseen circumstances that we're now in. So what kind of advice would you give those students who are here in Florida, but they're not Florida residents, but do want to engage in the upcoming election?
So if you are residing in Florida, you can still register to vote here. The registration application will ask you for your permanent address, but there's not a timeline that has to be associated with that. So even if you're only planning to live in Florida for 2 years or 4 years while you're a student, it's still fine to go ahead and get registered to vote here in our state. The key is, of course, you can't vote two places. So if you're already registered in your home state and you've moved to Florida and want to register here instead, that is absolutely fine. You can go ahead and do it. Just be sure that you don't receive ballots two places.
All fair and important points. Yes, and we'll make sure that we do share all this great information after the webinar today. So if any of y'all are on the call looking for more information, like I said, social media right now or some follow-up emails. But kind of switching gears really quick, you have a long history in Florida politics, mainly in the judicial branch, and your service and commitment to our state it's undeniable. We all heard that during Dr. Jacobs' introduction of you. So if you wouldn't mind, just kind of talk to me about what were some of those opportunities at UF or those moments that started to turn you in that direction or define the start of your career?
Yes, that's a great question. So of course, my time at the University of Florida laid the foundation academically for everything I later did. Academically speaking, I was a political science major and then went on to law school. So, that was the necessary academic educational foundation to go on and have the career that I've had. Equally important to me, though, were the opportunities for personal development and engagement on campus. For me, the student leadership opportunities, getting engaged with student groups and student government, taught me so many lessons that have proven to be critically important to future success. Everything from time management to event planning, negotiation skills, working in a group, leadership opportunities, really developed in me the other skills that are required, not just the academic knowledge, which is necessary, but also the interpersonal and leadership and community engagement orientation that was very essential to later pursuing some of these career opportunities. Another thing that's very important that I always like to share with student groups, because when I was in your shoes, I didn't anticipate this being true. And it's this, that I built relationships and made friends during those years, during that student engagement and involvement in student groups, who are people that I not only still know, Some of them continue to be close personal friends, but many of them also are very important professional relationships still. And I would not have anticipated that second piece to be quite as pronounced as it is today. So, as an example, when I was at the University of Florida, two of the people that I knew and was friends with and did tremendous amounts of student engagement with were Ashley Moody, our current Attorney General in the state of Florida, and Nikki Fried, our Agriculture Commissioner. And if you had asked the three of us in 1996 if we would all three be living in Tallahassee and holding the positions in state government that we were, it's just really impossible to anticipate where and how these relationships will continue to be important to you. And of course, the same was true on the bench. Many of my friends and contacts from the University of Florida in those years were also my colleagues as fellow judges. So the relationships you build now and the reputation you build now has the opportunity to be an incredibly important part of your future career.
I completely agree. And it's one thing I know, we've talked a little bit about our Tallahassee internship program. We have about 15 students that come up from UF every semester, predominantly in the springtime, to have the experience with the Florida legislature. And not only do we talk about your lasting reputation, you really only have one, but also the connections that have got you to the point that you're at today. So many of us in maybe our earlier years, or when we're just getting started, we think about the connections that will lead us to the next ring on the ladder, right? But we fail to kind of keep going back and checking in with them and letting them know where we've progressed.
Yes.
So it's one thing we talk a lot about. And so I have a similar but different question. We heard that you have a little bit of campaign experience, and obviously you have had that personal experience as well. But for those students that are looking to get involved in the electoral process, supporting campaigns, or just the community, because we know that nonprofits and other initiatives that might find themselves on the ballot need assistance. Do you have any advice for them?
Absolutely. And there are so many opportunities to get engaged if you are interested. To begin, political candidates are always looking for banks of volunteers, whether it's to make phone calls or go to events, or less so this cycle, but typically they really need an army of volunteers to walk door to door. And the same for particular issues like the constitutional amendments, or certain groups will be looking for volunteers to really try to reach out and speak to the public. So that's one way. Another thing that's another big priority for us is one of the most incredible ways that you can engage civically is to volunteer to be an election worker. When you go to vote on election day, those folks you see who are checking in voters, or you're handing your ballot to them, those election workers have just an incredible front row seat to our democracy and how it works. And so I would just really encourage all of you to consider volunteering as election workers. So there's training you go through. Election workers are actually paid as well. They're not volunteers, they're actually paid election workers. And it's just an unparalleled opportunity to get to learn about everything from how the voting systems work to the voting process. So that's another thing I think is a really neat opportunity. But most importantly of all, whatever it is that is your passion or interests you, I just very much encourage you all to take that step and get engaged and volunteer.
Well, with that, again, we very much thank you not only for your time, but your wisdom this afternoon now. I am going to go ahead and conclude it on my end, but we will leave the floor open if you have any final comments or remarks. Again, a big thank you. And I can see so many of the folks engaging online. They're eager to not only update their voter registration information or get ready to submit and cast their vote for the first time.
Absolutely. And so, I will just conclude with this. I want everyone to know that we are working very hard to both protect the integrity of our voting process and also keep voting safe and accessible for voters, whatever is their preference. We are very fortunate as a state to have 3 voting options. Many states do not have the types of voting options that we have. So we're very fortunate to have what we refer to as no excuse required vote by mail. That means you don't have to have a reason. It's just your preference. That's how you'd like to vote. So anyone is eligible to vote by mail. So if any of you are concerned about public health or the COVID-19, you absolutely have the ability to vote by mail and not go in person. At the same time, for those of you who do prefer to vote in person, we've worked very hard to ensure that safety measures are in place at every precinct, that our election workers are prepared. There'll be social distancing, there'll be hand sanitizer, all of that will be in place as well. One thing to know about election day voting, however, is because we are working so hard to keep those conditions safe and sanitary within the precincts, it might take a little longer this year. Historically and typically in Florida, we are very efficient. In most parts of the states, there aren't long lines, but this year, it might take a little longer to vote. So as you're planning your vote strategy and how you want to go cast that ballot, just that's one thing to bear in mind. Finally, again, probably the most important thing is go to those trusted sources for information. Don't be misled by what you see on social media. Some of our adversaries are working very hard to undermine public confidence in their candidates and in the elections process. So we want you all to leave today full of information and also knowing where to go if there's more that you want to learn, whether it's candidates, issues, or voting processes. We want you to be armed with all the very best information. And so finally, most important thing, go vote. We want to see record turnout from our young people this year.
Thank you, Secretary Lee and Samantha. And, very welcome words, both in terms of the professional development side of things, but also obviously on the voter registration and voter engagement side of things. I'm going to close with just a couple of quick remarks here. One very personal, so no one asked, but sort of the conversation about what was your first voting experience. So I have two I want to mention. One was actually when I was 5, not that I was voting when I was 5, that wouldn't be legal. But I remember this, I'm going to date myself. When I was 5, it was 1976. And so I was aware that there was an election taking place. And I remember asking my mom who she voted for. And she said, "Son, the secret ballot is a foundation of American democracy." And that's all she said. I still to this day do not know who she voted for in 1976. But it made obviously it was a memorable remark. The other one for me was 1992, which was the first election I could actually vote in. And so the first presidential election. And I remember sort of the exhilaration of going to vote and casting that ballot and then feeling like I was actually a full participant in American society at that point. And it is one of those landmark moments that you do remember actually for the rest of your life. So I wanted to just highlight that really quickly. The second point I want to mention draws on Secretary Lee's comments about Florida being a purple state. It wasn't always the case, right? And so not only was it not always the case, but if you look at how Florida has changed over the last 50 years, she mentioned that Florida is the 3rd most populous state in the country. In 1970, we had less than 6 million people in the state of Florida. We now have approximately 22 million people in the state of Florida. So in 50 years, we've gone from the smallish state population-wise to the 3rd most populous. And with that enormous demographic growth has come enormous demographic diversity, right? And so that's why we are a purple state with, obviously we think about retirees moving to Florida, but think about all the other folks who move to Florida, whether it's for the weather, for the education, whatever else. That is a driver of our purple statedness, if you will. Our identity as a purple state is that demographic growth that is really taking place over the last 50 years. And so it's transformed Florida's role in national politics fundamentally as really a bellwether for where things are going in terms of national politics as well. So I wanted to highlight that point. That's a historian in me coming out. A couple of technical points really quickly. We will be sending an email to all registrants of this session with additional information about voter registration and all of that. So Samantha mentioned there would be some emails. Anyone who registered for this event will get an email from us with some of that information. I'll also note for those of you who are students on this call, you have partners with TurboVote. TurboVote is not a voting app, but it is an app that allows you, no matter where your location is in the United States, to identify, by city, by county, by state, what are the necessary documents you need to be able to register to vote. It can help you identify where your voting precinct is and all of that kind of information. UF has partnered with TurboVote since 2012. And it's a very useful app to help you figure out how to be voter ready right? Again, it is not a voting app. You cannot submit your vote through it. You cannot directly register to vote through it, but it will help you make a plan for being voter ready. And again, we have partnered with TurboVote since 2012. With that, I just want to close by thanking again Secretary Lee, Samantha, President Fuchs for participation, and thank you to the 70-ish or so participants who called in. We really appreciate that. Do stay active on social media. Secretary Lee tweets pretty regularly and is on social media. And Samantha is as well, and the Graham Center has our own platforms that we're participating on. So you can follow us and engage with us on all of these kinds of issues there. And we will be doing some additional election programming, as I mentioned. We're still working out some of the details on that, so I can't provide specific information yet, but do sort of watch the Graham Center spaces for that information. Thank you to everyone, and this concludes the event.
Thank you.